All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of the Remarkable Coach Podcast. As always, I am your host, Michael Pacheco. Today with me, I have Marten Niner. Love that.
Thank you, Michael.
That's a great name.
Thank
Marten
you.
here. Marten is an accomplished executive, serial entrepreneur, ICF-certified professional coach with extensive sales, marketing, operations, and leadership development expertise in a broad range of Fortune 100 to startup businesses, including aerospace, military, manufacturing, construction, IT, and environmental chemicals. Marten,
Yeah, I did all that.
welcome to the Remarkable Coach. What don't you do?
Oh, I don't know. There's not much that I don't do. I live life to its fullest, and just say yes is more fun. It's kind of my catchphrase. So just try to say yes to as many opportunities as I can and have as much fun as I can.
I love it, brother. I like to start out this podcast by inviting our guests to just tell us a little bit more about yourself in your own words and kind of what brought you into coaching.
Well, about 8 years ago, well, first of all, I've spent the last about 35 years of my career being a serial entrepreneur, started 10 companies in all those different areas that you mentioned, plus a couple other ones. But about 8 years ago, I was just overwhelmed. I had, taken on too much. I was in the middle of a divorce that wasn't going great. I had a company that wasn't going great, and I was just really struggling. Wasn't taking care of myself, wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. And so thank goodness I was smart enough to hire some coaches, and I met them through just a bizarre chain of events, but it just kind of told me that it was meant to be. And so started coaching with them. The ladies at Cognova Consulting is where I still coach with them today, Dr. Marie Lascavio and her partner, Laura Hahn. And man, they just changed my life around. In about 6 months, I was still going through a divorce, but it was much more amicable, and I had a much better handle on the situation. The business was still struggling, but I had a better handle on my own brain and the worries and the fears and all that. And so I've been with them for the last 8 years, but about 4 years ago, I had an opportunity where I sold a business, and they asked me to join them as a coach. And so I went out and I got my certification, and I've been working with them for a little over 4 years now. And it's just been phenomenal. I'm just on a huge learning curve, which has just been great. And while I'm learning all this, I get to help tons of people as well and companies. And it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's always somehow more impactful when the coach has him or herself like a powerful experience with a coach, right? And it sounds like that was like you from day one.
Oh, I was a hot mess.
Yeah.
I'd wanted a mentor or mentors most of my career, but just had never found the right person or people. And then these ladies just came in at the right time. They had the right message. They're brilliant. And so, I went from a very miserable person to a very happy person in a very short period of time. And man, if I can help do that for other people, well, I just can't. It's better than any business that I've started. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Marten, obviously I want to talk a lot in this podcast about you and what you do and how you do it. Before we do that, would you be open to just talking a little bit more about maybe some of the details about your transformation that you saw, like how coaching, like how did you go from being a hot mess, right?
Right.
Into feeling great? Because I mean, I ask because I think for me, like I certainly resonate with that a lot. I was in a similar situation myself not that long ago. And I got myself a coach, and for me, my story was around being a dad and becoming a father for the first time.
Wow.
And it was something that was very scary for me. My father abandoned me and my mother when I was very young, so there was a lot of childhood story around that. And I think that a lot of our everybody listening to this has something where they can resonate with this. So I'm curious to know if you would be open to sharing a little bit more about your story.
Oh, absolutely. I think when I came to coaching, I was still haunted by the specters of my youth. I had a lot of traumas that were driving certain behaviors, and I didn't even realize that I was still traumatized. And I'm using trauma in a much larger sense, not like medical trauma,
Sure.
but these childhood traumas that we endure, and then it shapes kind of who we are and what our fears are. Very similar to you. I was living in fear and victimhood, and so to make that transition, the Dr. Marie and Laura, they kind of showed me the difference between force and power. There's a great book by Dr. David Hawkins that goes into it. It's a tough read, but I was a manager. I was forcing my way through life, and we call it advocating. So I'm trying to advocate for what I wanted, how I wanted it, when I wanted it, and then I was upset because I didn't get it. So I'd set all these unrealistic expectations and had lots of judgments around them, and then and they were ridiculous. Not at the time, but upon further reflection with the coaches, I found out how ridiculous that was, and was able to make the transition from that force managing advocacy into power, which what we call power, or Dr. Hawkins calls power, of living in your power, living in inquiry, living, questioning what's going on rather than trying to insert my opinion on what's going on, trying to find more information. So becoming, instead of a manager, becoming a leader, instead of, becoming an advocate for what I wanted, started to inquire and understand more about what other people needed and wanted. And this happened both on my personal life and in my business life. And so you need both, but I was all the way over here. And so they helped bring me probably maybe more to center toward being living in power, living in uncertainty. When I used to walk into the room, I was very certain about what was going to happen. I told the team, okay, this is what I want done. You do this, I want it done by this, rather than sitting with them and saying, okay, what do you guys need? That servant leadership model was completely foreign to me until I went into coaching and suddenly realized, I've been doing it wrong the entire time, which is part of the reason why I was so miserable. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And now I love the fact that I don't know what I don't know. I go through every day not knowing what's going to happen next. And so it's a subtle shift, but it's a big shift.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm guessing it's safe to assume then that you take that, like, the dichotomy of entitlement, right, versus this childlike curiosity, or what you call like living in power. You take this onto your into your coaching as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you do and how you help the people that you coach?
Sure. Well, I'm there basically to hold them through their experience. We recommend a lot of reading, really feeding the mind. Michael Singer, I don't know if you've read Untethered Soul or Surrender Experiment, but those are usually the first two books that we recommend. So we have a language to talk about this roommate in our heads that everybody's dealing with. And then once we have that language, we really dive into what that roommate is saying and what that self-talk and all the craziness that goes on in between our ears. And I didn't realize it was going on until they kind of stopped me and said, "Hey, did you realize that you have a voice in your head that argues with itself and doesn't really know what the truth is, but just tries to convince you that it is," which Michael Singer calls your roommate. And if you took that being outside of yourself and just sat them next to you and they said all the things out loud that you say in your head, you would think that's a crazy person, right? And so it's getting in touch with our crazy person, and we do a lot of work, what we call the ego defenses, because that's that mechanism, that stream of thoughts, that stream of consciousness. We call the ego defense system, because that's really what it's there to do, is protect you. That's why you're going through these possibilities and arguing and looking at the worst case scenarios. It's it's designed to protect us. But unfortunately, in today's society and culture, it's overactive, way overactive. And when there's a lot of fear there, there's a lot of anxiety because of those ego defenses. And unfortunately, today, most people are living in what we call it the stool of the ego. It's the three legs of the stool are: I'm not safe, I'm not loved, I'm not good enough. And if someone is sitting in an unwelcome or an uncomfortable emotional state, they're usually in one or more of those places. And so in our coaching, we spend a lot of time diving into that and unpacking that and finding out where it came from. A lot of times it's based in our youth and experiences that we don't even remember happened until we really start dialing down into what's going on in our minds. There's techniques on using the body to find where those memories are stored, because there's a great book called Body Bears the Burden that talks about how we have these, Michael Singer calls them samskaras, these memories that are integrated into our bodies and our minds of these things that happened in the past. And those fears, those worries, those anxieties will influence our actions and our thoughts of today. And so getting below that and getting underneath that is really important. At least that it has been for my coaching.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. The Surrender Experiment is a book that I have read before, and I feel like it is a life that I've lived for a while, which is great, right? And my wife's actually reading it right now. We just had
oh, that's fantastic.
We just had our first child March 1st, so she's going on 6 months, 5.5 months old now. And my wife's she's got to go back to work this coming Monday, and she's struggling with that. And so I was like, I think you should read this book. I think it would help. So she took me up on that, which is nice. But I love the idea of accepting that you're not completely in charge and that you're a passenger sometimes.
I would argue that we're a passenger all the time. And so would my coaches. My coaches talk about imagining a life of floating from one beautiful moment to the next. And really, control is an illusion, but it causes so much sorrow, so much sadness, so much pain when we think we can control someone else, control our business, control a forecast, of a year out. I've done my share of forecasts in the past, and now I look at them like, how arrogant was I that I thought that I could figure out what the business was going to do in a year. And soon as the first month happened, we're completely off the forecast because some crazy interesting thing happened. So it's really about being able to live in the unknown and living in curiosity. And what you find is that when you're not dealing with all of this chatter, you have so much more information coming to you about other people, about situations. Just the universe is much more open, and you just get a bigger sense of what the truth is. And so when you're living in truth and gratefulness, then all of the anxiety and fear just evaporate. But it takes a lot of time. A typical coaching agreement is usually anywhere between 3 months to 2 years. And most of my clients I've been coaching for most of the last 4 years, and seeing amazing improvement, seeing them, go through the pandemic with confidence and having fun and not ruining their work-life balance, and really navigating some, difficult things. These people run large manufacturing companies, or they're in charge of 300 to 600 people, and so that's a lot of randomness. That's a lot of things that are not under your control, even though you sometimes you think that you're in control. And so to see those people sit down with their team, and it's kind of the classic example I talked about earlier. When I would sit down and say, okay, here's the problem, team. This is what I want to do about it. What do you think? And then, everybody just tells you what you want to hear and move on. versus becoming a leader that goes into the team and says, okay, this is the problem. What do you guys think we should do? And then just sit there and listen and get all the information and ask questions. And then, the servant leadership model is make sure that they have everything they need to be able to complete the task. And man, it's so much more powerful. It's so much more efficient. You don't get 2 months down the road in a project and wonder why everybody's not doing what you wanted them to do. That's because they weren't on board. But when you do it in a powerful way, when you do it in a leadership way, servant leadership way, then everybody's on board because everybody got to say what their concerns were. And at some point during the project, if something goes awry, they're not afraid to bring it up because it was everyone's idea versus the manager or the person in charge, so to speak, coming in and being ticked that it's not happening the way that they think, or you didn't think that XYZ was going to happen in 3 months and lose your mind over it.
I love it. This is going to sound silly and certainly nerdy to some, but when I think about really great leadership, frequently one of the I'll say characters. One of the characters that comes to mind for me is Captain Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek. This is a man who is not afraid to make difficult decisions, but always consults his people. Because he doesn't have all the answers, and he knows that. If he thought that he had to be the expert at engineering and at navigation and at everything else, there's no way he could make those decisions, because he'd spend all of his time learning and becoming a master at all these different things, right? But he's the leader, so he's got to reach out and talk to his people. And so, yeah, I always think of him when I think about like really great leadership and servant leadership, to go back to what you're speaking of.
Yeah, I am a huge Star Trek nerd, so you're speaking my language.
Beauty. I love it. Marten, tell us more about who your clients are. Who do you work with?
So I because I've had such a broad range of experiences, I'm really work with a broad range of clients. I've got several who work in different subsidiaries of a large company. It's a manufacturing company, so they're dealing with engineers, they're dealing with HR, they're dealing with creative types. Like I said, they have anywhere from say 25 to 600 direct reports that they are leading. And so that's one part of my business. And then I have another part of the business where that's just my own consulting, where I'm doing business development and leadership development for startups and smaller companies. So probably 10 and smaller. Most of my companies I grew from 0 to about 8 million before we did something with them. And so that's kind of the sweet spot as far as business that I know. But from a leadership standpoint, I've also worked with large companies. I've sold into large companies. I've ran sales teams as an outsider, putting my product through a distribution network, and so had to become friends with and lead 200 sales reps and get them to look at my product as being more important than other folks. And so I've actually got to really see and enjoy both sides of that business culture that we're seeing. The employee, a large corporate bureaucracy versus that small, nimble entrepreneur.
Nice. And how do you get your clients? How do you market your services?
It's really through referral. My coaches have been doing this for 40 years and 20 years respectively. So they have quite a long client history. They get referred quite a bit. So I get some leads that way. I'm also in a mastermind group where we share information, and so understanding more about other people's businesses. And so I've gotten some referrals from that. I work with a bookkeeping company that's a client of mine, and that bookkeeping client has referred me to several of their clients that this bookkeeper could see needed some help.
Nice.
And so, yeah, it's just been, very, floating from one beautiful moment to the next, and just
Very
looking and
organic.
seeing, very organic, yeah, and seeing the opportunities as they hit me, and just saying yes to them and seeing what happens. And not everything works out, but every time I've learned something, I've been able to share something, and it's been a lot of fun.
Sure. Sure. You mentioned earlier that your coaching agreements can sometimes vary quite broadly from 3 months to, I think you said, 2 years. What does a typical engagement with you look like? Is there a typical one?
I don't really think there is a typical one. On the Cognova side, we'll get referred, someone that's a leader in an organization that's struggling, and we'll have we usually do dual coaching where there's two coaches. We find that we can get a lot more information across, and by having those two different thought processes, and one person can observe and listen, and the other person can engage, and so we find a lot of power in that. So from individuals, we that's what we've seen. We also do, on the Cognova side, we do 360-degree peer review. We do personality profiles, the 16 PF, and then we do cognitive testing as well for individuals and teams. For teams, to see how well all the personalities jive and what kind of personality types are missing, or maybe there's too many of a certain personality type, and so how do we balance that team? And so we try to use all that data so we can find out where the team or where the individual is and meet them where they're at, and then begin coaching from there. Because we don't have kind of a standard, hey, this is where you step in here, A plus B equals C, because everybody's in a different place. Yep. And so we've tried to find out where they're at and start from there.
Nice. There's got to be at least a dozen popular personality tests out in the world right now, and probably dozens more that are less popular. Which ones do you like, and why?
So we like the 16 PF. It's one of the first personality profiles that was created. It was back in the 50s. Okay. It was adopted by the military. I took the 16 PF before I went into the military back in the 80s. Okay. And it was a little bit different than it is now. But it takes basically 16 core personality traits, and it's one of the most researched personality profiles that's out there. Yeah. And a lot of the popular personality profiles are some derivation of the 16 PF. And right. So I became certified earlier this year in that, and I have still been working with the Cognova to do it. Just it hadn't become certified until this year. Yeah. And really enjoyed the certification process, because I honestly, was one of the, I didn't know what I didn't know. Was not looking forward to it. I'm like, I'm too old to go to school. I'm too old. And then I ended up loving it.
You're a coach, man. You should know better than that.
Of course. And that's part of the coaching process is, we all, even the best coaches have those moments, have those days, has that totally. Those ego defenses come up and say those ridiculous things, and it's we call them opportunities to practice our awareness. And so that opportunity presented itself to me. I realized how ridiculous it was, dived into the course material and loved it. But that thought still came. It didn't linger, yeah. But it was still there. And so that's part of what we like to say is that we teach what we need to learn and learn what we need to teach. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be better at it. I want to learn more about it for myself, and by teaching it, by explaining it, by sharing it with you and other people, I'm just deepening that within myself.
For sure. Yeah, I want to. You reminded me there. I want to circle back to the ego topic real quick. Are you familiar? There's a spiritual guru, we'll say, named Adyashanti. Have you heard of this guy before? Absolutely.
We read quite a bit of Adyashanti. Okay. Yes.
There you go. I was just gonna recommend. There's one video. I've got a few of his books myself. He's great. I've got one of them signed, actually, which is kind of cool too.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah. But there's one video in particular, I think you can find it on YouTube, that I really like of his, called "Surrender or Suffer."
I think I've seen it. Yeah,
Yep. And it's exactly what it
fantastic.
sounds like. And it's just we'll add this for those listening and watching. We'll add I'll put that video in the show notes. We'll get some of the books that you mentioned as well in the show notes. So if you guys want to come back and kind of check out some of these resources, I'd recommend that. It's a great video. It's not long. I don't know, what is it, 8 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very easy to digest. And I find that this work becomes very spiritual. I think that the interior journey is really what our spiritual journey is. And so, my coaches have asked me to read a lot of different spiritual texts, the Tao Te Ching, Ai Shanti, there are a lot of Indian references. So there's so much there when you can take step back from the dogma and really look at what they're saying from a different light. It's really fascinating. I mean, the things that you and I are talking about, they've been talking about for thousands of years and writing about. Right. And we're just like, it's like every so often we like rediscover these secrets. They're not that secret.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this stuff maybe got lost during, like the age of enlightenment, right? Or the industrial era, when things started getting, quote, scientific. Some of this stuff got kind of maybe set aside a little bit, and it definitely.
Oh yeah, during the 70s and 80s, the whole thing, we'll just take auras, for example.
Sure.
That was considered woo-woo science, or not even pseudoscience. That you had an aura of energy about you. Well, okay, fast forward to about 10, 15 years ago. Now they have a device that can see that your electromagnetic field extends anywhere from 3 to 6 to up to 15 feet away from you. So we're really this physical being in this energetic body, and it was woo-woo back in the 80s, and now it's science.
Yeah. Not even 30 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really another piece of, I think, that what really changed my my direction as far as going from that miserable path to the happy path is that we talk about that there's what that you know, and that's a small thing, and then there's what that you don't know, and that's a little bit bigger thing, and then what you don't know is massive. And I looked at like half the things that I learned, if not more, that I learned in physics and science in high school. Yeah. Has completely been debunked, and they're teaching completely new things, different things nowadays. So what I thought I knew, I didn't really know. And so to be able to live in that, I don't know what I don't know, and then be curious and continue that journey of learning. That's the path that we recommend. If I have someone that comes to me that wants coaching but says, I'm not a reader. Okay, well, will you listen to Audible? Oh, no, I won't do that. Oh, well, when you're ready to do that, let me know. Because you have to be that type of person who's seeking something different.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, is if you're going into coaching from the coachee's side, you have to be prepared to do the work, right? It's not, and I think that's the delineation, right, between a coach and a consultant. A consultant's going to tell you what to do. Is going to spell it out for you and tell you what to do. And a coach is going to say, he's going to be more of a guide than a teller.
I think so. I think the coach goes on the journey with you and holds you. We call it holding. So when someone's going through, an emotional response to something, we're there to hold them through that so they can get through it and get to the other side rather than pushing it down. Most people will get to that emotion and go, no, I'm not feeling that today. Versus we've got to get through the emotion or feeling or whatever it is, memory, in order to get to the other side. And then once that's released, it's released forever. So every step after that is just that much lighter. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I had, so I of course have coaches as well. I've got a couple of them, and I'm part of a coaching group, and we had a call. Today's Tuesday. So this was last Thursday. So just not too long ago, a few days ago. And, it was he walked us through some body work, being present in your body and that sort of thing. And one of the other guys on the call was going through some stuff, and so the coach was working with him, and we're all watching and supporting and holding space for these two to do their work. And what really struck me as powerful is the coach said, what you need to do is set aside some time to just sob, not to cry, to sob, like ugly, ugly cry. You really
Yes.
got to ugly cry, because once you get that energy out, you'll be able to begin working on fixing what it is you want to fix.
Yeah.
But you got to
I've
get, like you
cried
said,
more in the last 8 years than I had my entire life. So
yeah,
I get it. I never cried before. That was,
yeah,
military, you don't cry.
yeah. There's no
And
crying
so
in baseball.
no, there's no crying in baseball. Come on. But thank goodness I was able to rid myself of that false belief and
Yeah.
really embrace. And now I have a much better relationship with my emotions. And I know when I'm in a bad mood, and I know what to do to fix that bad mood. Because we all get in them. We all, wake up on the wrong side of the bed and like, but now I know my body because I'm listening, and I've gone through that spiritual release, if you will. And it's there's just nothing better.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Marten, what sort of things what sort of things did you struggle with when you first started coaching?
Patience.
Okay.
Just having patience to allow things to happen, because it was kind of like I was going for 50 some odd years, or 49 years. And then it was that we sold that one business, and I had nothing to do except for maybe 8 clients when I started.
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of free time.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I wanted to get out there and jump and, start getting clients and da-da-da. And my coaches were like, nope, you need to learn how to be, we're human beings. We're not human doings. So
Uh-huh.
learn
I
how to
love it.
be, learn how to get in touch with your power so you can really be a good coach. And so I spent a lot of time reading. I've read over 100 books in the last 4 years.
Nice.
All on different subjects relating to this. Some of it, is psychology in the body. Some of it is spiritual tech. Some of it's, stuff like, Michael Singer, Dr. Hawkins, Map of Consciousness was a great book by him, of, really trying to understand what consciousness is. Because I guess really what we're teaching is awareness, right? Of being aware. And so our model is that you've got your ego defenses, and we've all got a bunch of them. And you think of that as like our software, right? They're little apps that run when we get, we see something we don't like. Oh, their anger app, kicks up, right? It's kind of like that. I don't know if you saw that Pixar movie Inside Out, where
I did not.
you will, because you have a kid, and it's fantastic. I have 4 kids who are grown now, but watched tons of those. But anyway, so you've got these, these voices, right, that you're dealing with. And so we help people get out of that into their observing ego, which is the highest function of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the part of your brain that's listening to the argument and making decisions, right? So that's the highest function. But then there's another part of it. It's a larger part. It's what we call awareness, and it's something that's always there, but you have to step into it. You can't bring it into yourself. You have to step into awareness, and in order to do that, you've got to learn how to be. You've got to learn how to slow down. You've got to learn how to observe, what's going on inside of you and around you, and really be able to sit very calmly with yourself. And so it took me, good 3 years, 2 to 3 years of that before now I'm very comfortable if I've got nothing to do. I'm very comfortable if I do have something to do. I usually make a list, and I'll sit and I'll just meditate on the list, and whatever the most important thing pops up, I'll go and get that done. And it's just such a more gentle way of being than before. I'd write a list and just rush through it from top to bottom, and whatever didn't get done got put to the next one on the top of the next list. And so I've just learned a different way. So it's a lot slower, a lot more gentle. We take gentle mornings, so have time in the morning to kind of collect our thoughts and meditate a little bit to really be centered for the rest of the day. And so now I have the time to do those things, and now I couldn't give them up, because if I jumped back into a 40-hour work week, Oh, I'd struggle.
Yeah, there's so you mentioned mornings, taking time in the mornings, meditating. There is a neuroscientist named Andrew Huberman, and I watched he's got a great YouTube channel. I think it's called Neuro Lab, something like that. And I watched a video from him just the other day, and he was talking about the REM level of sleep, where your brain is processing stuff that you learned or that you were thinking about, or the stuff that you had, put in your mental back pocket the day before.
Right. Yeah.
And if you wake up in the morning and hop on this guy right away and start scrolling, you're distracting the part of your mind in the morning that processes all of the stuff that you figured out with your subconscious overnight. So by slowing down and taking your morning slowly, by meditating, by just sitting in a chair and thinking, by going for a walk.
Thinking.
Yeah, or not thinking. By going for a walk.
Yes.
You're able then to consciously process all the stuff that your subconscious was working on the night before. I've noticed a huge difference in the last few years since I, changed and kind of created a morning routine. And it's just, anytime I speak to someone who's flustered or they seem anxious or they never have enough time. That's a big one.
Yep. That was me. That was me before coaching. Never had time. I was always going. Had 4 kids, 2 to 3 companies going at any one time, and was just go. Oh. And now we call it slowing down to speed up. Now that I've slowed down, and I'm so much more effective at getting what I want done. And the things that really need to get done. The things that didn't really need to get done kind of fall by the wayside. And I'm like, oh, I really didn't need to do that. Or somebody else takes care of it for me. Yeah. And so then I'm really able to focus on what's important to me, which is my family, my friends, my music, my coaching, learning, gardening, all those things now that I get to do that I would have never had time for before.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Marten, tell us about some remarkable wins that you've had in your coaching career.
Remarkable wins. Oh man, it seems like it's all the time. But one gentleman, we'll call him G. He runs a fabrication plant back east. And when he came to me probably 3 years ago, this guy was sleeping 4 hours a night. I was constantly working, was worried about he was going to have a heart attack, had a lot of stress, anxiety, very similar to the way I was 8 years ago. And, within probably 6 months to a year of working with him, he changed that. He started to sleep longer. Him and his wife started taking vacations, and he wouldn't take his laptop and he turned off of his phone. He allowed his people to, run the plant while he wasn't there. During the pandemic, he and his wife took tons of walks, and he started working out. And I talked to him last week, and we were scheduled for an hour and a half. About 45 minutes in, he'd just kind of given us an update, and he's like, you know what? I'm feeling great. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to go get I'm going to go take a walk, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Well, we'll talk to you next month. And so, to see someone go from that, tortured human to this extreme, very successful human, same job, same problems, probably more problems during the pandemic because, supply chain issues and all that stuff. And, he's still battling that today, but he's not taking it personally. He's not letting it, he can turn it off when he gets home. Or, maybe not 100%, but far better than he did 3 years ago. Yeah. So that's the biggest win lately that's come to mind.
I love it. That's a great one. Marten, I've got quote here: the most powerful person in the room is the most aware person in the room. Tell us
Absolutely.
tell us about that.
Well, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about that power versus force. So,
Yep.
to kind of dissect that sentence, you have to think, okay, well, what does awareness mean and what does power mean, right? So how are you the most powerful person in the room? And so, from our perspective as leaders, and that's really what we're trying to coach as amazing leaders within organizations,
Mhm.
is that if we can move from that force, that advocacy into inquiry, then that's you get so much more information about what's going on in the situation, which makes you more powerful. Information is power. And so if you're stuck in your ego, which we call it, or force, then you only have a limited amount. And usually your force is met with equal and opposite force.
Mhm.
So if anyone out there is in a relationship, any relationship, where you argue with the spouse, or there's a coworker that drives you crazy, or a relative that gets your blood going, more than
Mhm.
likely you're dealing with them force on force. And when you can move into power, when you can move into inquiry, when you can move into that state of being and start to be curious about, well, why are they the way they are? What makes them think in that manner? And
Mhm.
you really, and we it's not it's another doctor who coined this term. I apologize, I don't remember who it is, but he coined the term of COAL, COAL, and it
Mhm.
means curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love.
Mhm.
And not like romantic love, just love for humankind. And so if you can approach those situations with those four attributes, then you are going to be much more powerful in that conversation, in that relationship, in that transaction, whatever is happening, whether it's personal or business. If you're sitting across the aisle from a coworker who is one of those, that just gets your blood going, it's
Mhm.
more likely because you want them to think one way and they want you to think another way, and
Mhm.
you're just beating each other up. Versus if you could shift and say, okay, what is this person really trying to tell me? What are they trying to communicate? What is the basis? And you may find out that they really have a good point, or you may find out that they really don't know what they're talking about. But the only way you're going to find out is to ask really good questions.
Nice. I'm curious, Marten, so I know you get most of your clients right now through referrals. If you were
Mm-hmm.
to market yourself, what would you market yourself as a business coach or a life coach or something else?
Probably it's definitely it's both, right? But it's really about life, because
Yep.
and I guess I would coin it as an awareness coach,
Mhm.
because going a little further about the aware person is the most powerful. That being in touch with that aware part that we talked about earlier, you've got your ego defenses, you got your observing ego, and then you have your awareness. When you can
Mhm.
sit in that awareness, um, that's when we are our most powerful. That and time goes by very quickly. When we're working on a hobby, when we're working on music, and you're just in that flow, that's a meditative way to get to awareness. And so what we're also teaching is how to capture that in our everyday life, not just when we're doing those little things that we love, or those things that get us into that flow. But how can you be in the flow all the time?
Nice. I like that. Um, you've coined, well, let me put it this way. You've mentioned some specific terms as we've been talking here, and I see we're kind of coming up on time here, so I'll try and keep this brief. But you've mentioned like living in inquiry, being in your power. You refer to ego as force. Is
Mm-hmm.
that is that something that are you creating your own vocabulary intentionally, or is that just a way that did that naturally come as a way that you guys would talk about your coaching and what you do, or is this something that's intentionally done to create maybe a brand for your coaching, or tell us about that?
Well, it's really from my work with Cognova.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's creating a language around what's going on in our heads and this journey that we're on. And language a lot of times will fail us when we're talking about these things, because power and force, just for example, probably mean completely different things to you than they do to me. And so we do spend some time within coaching of defining these terms. The power versus force that we're talking about came from Dr. Hawkins. And so when we have someone read Dr. Hawkins, or when we have someone read Michael Singer, now we have a common understanding of this language, and we have a language that we can really start really diving deep. But you have to have those definitions of those words. And so you've got, and you have to agree on what they mean, so you can have deep, meaningful conversation. Because if I just started talking about power versus force, and I didn't go into advocacy, inquiry, and all those other things, then somebody might just think that I'm talking about Star Wars and the Force, right? Because there's a lot of, we call it, it's a cliche. It's one word or one concept contains a lot of information because
Sure.
it's related to something as iconic as Star Wars. I'm also a Star Wars nerd.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the English language, but really any language at all is by definition, humans create it. It's an organic thing. Language is an entity itself, and constantly changing based on little tweaks in how people are using it in pop culture, in one-on-one conversations. Like it's always moving. It's organic. So I can see like how important it would be to establish a language with the people that you're working with, and make sure that as just establish a syntax so you can all talk about the same thing and understand what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And this is not something we normally talk about. Most people don't share their innermost thoughts and feelings and failures, what they would consider a failure. And so we establish a very deep trust very quickly with our clients, and so we're able to really talk about things that they've never talked about to anybody. And so you have to have a language around that, and you have to have an understanding about how to get through it. And so I think it's been important for me in my growth to spend a lot of time on that language, and really understanding what my coaches mean when they're coaching me and when I'm coaching other folks.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned Michael Singer, Surrender Experiment, a couple other books. What are the top, let's say arbitrarily, the top 3 books that you would recommend somebody read who is listening to this podcast, watching it on YouTube, and they're resonating with what you're talking about?
So Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And then after that, there's just so many good ones. It really depends on what's going on. There's some great parenting books, for people that are struggling with their kids. There's people that are, there's a Stop Walking on Eggshells is a great book for people who are dealing with narcissists or narcissist, syndromes. The parenting book is The Whole Brain Child. And that's a phenomenal book for parents. And then more on the spiritual side, I would say Dr. David Hawkins. It's called The Works of Dr. David Hawkins, and he passed away, I believe, in 2015. So it's kind of some of his papers and talks and some information out of some of his books that have kind of been condensed into one book that covers a lot of neat things. And so that's what I would, like, just off the cuff, recommend.
Sure. Those are great. I'll throw one in that I really like that you may or may not be familiar with. It's by Frederick Dodson, Parallel Universes of Self.
Oh, no, I haven't read that one.
It's just real. I'll read you the little snippet from it. It says, the purpose of this book is to bring the parallel worlds theory as known to physics and science fiction into application in your personal reality and everyday life. You can create your reality by becoming the parallel world version of yourself for whom the experience you want is already real. So it's a little bit of the The Secret kind of thing, you know. So it's a little bit of that, but it's a fascinating book. Especially,
it sounds like it.
You mentioned you like Star Trek, so you got to be, and Star Wars. So you're a little bit of a sci-fi nerd.
Oh yeah.
I would recommend it for you to check out when you get a chance. It's just, besides being spiritual, it's also a little bit geeky. So I think it's right. I think it's right up your alley.
Sounds right up my alley.
Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah,
Marten,
I love that.
Yeah, this has been fantastic, man. Is there anything else that you would like to chat about that we haven't had an opportunity to touch upon yet?
I don't know. We've covered a lot of things. I just really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of knowledge with folks that watch this and other coaches. I really don't see coaches as competition. I think everybody on this planet needs a coach, whether they're small, old, man, woman. We all need help. I don't think I could have gotten to where I'm at today without a mentorship. And that's one thing I think that you also read in a lot of these older works, that most everyone, I think that Buddha's the only one who got it without any help. And maybe Buddha and Jesus. Everybody else needed help, needed a guide, needed a mentor.
Well, yeah, that's great, man. Awesome. Marten, where can our listeners and viewers connect with you online, social media?
LinkedIn, Marten Niner, Marten with an E, Niner. I'm the only one on there with that name. Website is yesismorefun.com. And that's probably the easiest way to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Marten Niner, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you making the time for it. This has been a blast.
My pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate you.
And thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Stop recording.